I was just asking the group here is with us. So welcome everyone who is online joining us. I'm Sarah Davis. I'm one of the owners of Mountain Bird Coffee. We also have Steve Gassaway, who's actually the founder of Mountain Bird Coffee and Tea 13 years ago, and then Bailey Braddock, who is one of our sales managers. And so we're here today really to give you guys an experience both from a coffee drinking perspective, but also what happens on the farm. And we have Jim McEnany, one of our farm partners, who's going to walk us through that process so you can really appreciate what it takes to get to here. And then we're going to taste the highlights of that and let you guys help us decide which coffee should we actually choose to go forward for this one. And so this is a great time. We're going to do part is going to be on video and the other part will be here in the workshop. We're going to ask for you to hold questions until we ask for questions. But we'll ask them along the way. We won't wait till the very end to do that. So I'm going to have them just put up our presentation. And Jim is on the line. And so just be gracious with us as we're in the hybrid experience. So there might be some echoing as him and I try to have a dialogue, but know that we're working through that. So to give you an agenda of what today is going to look like. Yeah, so just one more. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the seed, the coffee seed, what happens on the farm, and what happens when it gets to our roastery. Our roastery is in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We started 13 years ago. It was a dream, and this is my dad. So we're a family-owned business. So it was a dream of my dad's 13 years ago to start this business, and has since become a very important part of our family, but also to the communities that we serve. We have the unique ability to be able to go to the farm level and source coffee at that level, to see what's going on at the farm, to really choose farms that are in line with our mission, right? Our sustainability and ethically sourced mission, which are really important to us. And so you'll see how that looks on these farms. I'm going to ask, then we're going to do from roastery to cup, right? So we'll give you a little bit of background of that roastery, and we'll have Steve walk us through that. We're going to do a profile cupping, different than a green cupping. Profile cupping is where we have roasted these at different levels, and we're going to decide which one goes to the final product consumer. And then after that, we're going to let you help us decide, giving us feedback. You don't need to be an expert today, just need to be engaged in the process. So if you'll go to the next one. So let's talk about what we're going to learn down on the farm. So on the farm level, we are going to meet Jim. Jim is actually in Vermont. He's not actually down at the farm. We have not been able to go to the farms we source from in Central and South America for 2 years because of COVID. I'm going to ask him to walk us through, though, what is the difference between commercial grade coffee, which most of you all are drinking at home, and specialty coffee, and the nuances of that. We're going to then focus on specialty coffee and farming of specialty coffee, which is very different than farming commercial grade coffee. And then really some of those supply chain issues that are creating coffee price concerns. If you guys are listening to anything going on there, you see coffee going up along with everything else, but there's some true things happening down at the farm level that are creating that. So I'm going to open it up to Jim. So if I can get Jim on the line with us and then have him share the video.
Feedback.
Yeah. I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
To talk through commercial grade coffee, walk us through the farm, and also just the supply chain kind of issues going on.
Okay.
I'll let you go now.
All right. So I'm Jim McEnany. I'm the green manager for our coffee operations in Costa Rica and our other operations that we have in Colombia and other sourcing. So we export, import. So basically we're going to touch base on our main estate farms in Costa Rica that produce specialty grade coffees, not your commercial grade coffees that you drink at gas stations and elsewhere. But I put together a video that will go through more or less kind of the start to finish of the operations that we have. And it's labor intensive. It's in Costa Rica, there's no operation. The only mechanics would be a truck picking up fruit and bringing it to the processing station. So everything's pretty manual on the specialty side. So this intro is a kind of an overhead view of our farm, Hacienda La Manita, which is in the Zona de los Santos area of Costa Rica, so about 70 miles south of San Jose. And you can see from the terrain, it's pretty steep, rugged. We have a lot of interplanting that's not just coffee, as you can see, a lot of the big trees, vegetation that we planted for erosion control. Also, some of our shade trees are planted that help fix nitrogen into the soil so we don't have to provide as much fertilizer, which we're going to see fertilizer prices go up significantly in the coming months. So we're trying to offset as much that we can do with organic methods and pretty much be self-sufficient. So this in front of you is small 1-year-old seedlings, coffee seedlings that are in the farm that just been planted. So you notice the spacing. We do keep the weeds and the grass. That helps keep the moisture. We don't use any herbicides or pesticides on our farms. We want to keep it as natural as possible. And so kind of give you a viewpoint of our farm and some of the lots that we produce. All of this is our La Pradera farm. And then this is La Manita over here. And then these are a couple of the other lots that are part of the La Manita farm. And it also goes all the way up. And so there's a road that carries all the way through from Frylas, from San Jose to La Manita. And it's about a 2.5-hour drive to go the 70 kilometers. And just to kind of give you a feeling, this is on the way to our La Pradera farm. This farm we acquired about 8 years ago, and we have chosen this farm to use a lot of our experimental processes, different varieties that we plant on the farm, which also allows us to offer unique coffees to our clients like Mountain Bird, and have kind of exclusive coffees that you can't get anywhere else because we're growing them, processing them, and exporting them. And some of the lots are pretty small. It might be 5 bags that are 69 kilos, or it might be boxed into vacuum packed boxes. So just depends on the size of the coffee lot. And this farm was Rainforest Line certified in 2019. So more recently, it was just a lot of the paperwork and getting the audits done in order to bring this up to become Rainforest Line certified. Again, just gives you kind of visual representation of the terrain that you'd be picking coffee at. And again, like, we're focusing on specialty, we're focusing on quality, we're focusing on sustainability. The whole process goes hand in hand. We need to have motivated, healthy workers. We also need to have extremely healthy environment to grow the coffee in. Otherwise, we're going to be plagued with funguses, pests, low production. And since we are focusing on specialty, we want to reduce any impacts to those. So we want to do everything that we can to have the quality be first. So we're not going to cut corners on nursery stock. We're not going to cut costs on the inputs that we put in the ground, the compost, the shade, and then the picking, the quality of the fruit that we're going to pick off the trees. We're not picking commercial coffee, which would be a lot of unripes, maybe some underripes, overripes, stems, leaves, you name it, as they're picking it. And when it gets turned into the mill, there's some ways to separate some of that foreign debris, but a lot of it starts at the farm level. It's just picking the quality. There's a lot of different ways you can pick the coffee. Some origins, they strip pick, they pull everything off the tree versus just the ripe fruit, which is what we're focusing on. And this is our nursery. So we produce all of our own nursery stock. We select seeds and trees from our own farm and repropagate them. And the idea behind that is these different varieties have been accustomed to our growing environment. So they produce better for where we are versus just buying nursery stock from the government or a big farm that would be selling it that we don't know the verified genetics. And so we try to keep everything in house so we know exactly what we're planting, what we're growing, and how it's going to result in the cup. So that there's about 100 plus thousand seedlings in there. So each one has to be taken up by hand and then planted into the plantation by hand. So every tree that has to be taken out has to be dug up, and then the fresh new seedling will be replaced. Another view. And so this is the only spot on the farms that we have irrigation, because it's important. Whatever happens here on the nursery will impact our production in 4 to 5 years. So if we have any issues here, we're going to see a disruption in volume in 5 years. So again, like everything's manual. A lot of the specialty coffee that we grow is labor dependent. Right now, we're seeing labor shortages. People leaving Central America because of low coffee prices to go to the United States. What we're trying to do is show that there is sustainability and future in coffee farming, and all aspects of it, from working at on the farm, the transportation, and at the mill level. And by paying higher prices, paying benefits, and having a good work environment for the employees makes it an ideal place to work. So we've been lucky with our labor pool in Costa Rica, but some of our partners in other countries have had issues finding enough people to pick the coffee. So that's becoming a problem. So as Sarah mentioned before, coffee, the coffee bean, it's not a bean, it's a seed of a coffee cherry. And so early on in the season, we have a really dry period where the buds start to form on the trees. And then about this time of year, probably the 3rd week of March, we have heavy rains for 3 days. And then this initiates the flowering. And so from this point, we've got around 9 months before the flower turns into a cherry, which would be around December, and we start to pick the coffee. So here we're using the byproduct of our washing. When we wash the coffee, we remove mucilage, which is kind of like the fruit on the seed. And that's mostly sugar and a little bit of fiber. And what we do is we separate that out, we add some bacteria to it, some microbes, and then we take it out to the field and we spread it. This is kind of like an equivalent of a compost tea. And so we're trying to reuse all of our inputs to reduce our dependence on outside, like fertilizers or supplements. And another thing too, with the difference between specialty and commercial coffee is, with the specialty, we're not using herbicides or pesticides because it's going to impact the health of the plantation. It's going to impact the taste of the coffee. And a lot of those, a lot of the commercial farms, they're mechanically harvesting, they're spraying herbicides, they're spraying pesticides, all sorts of stuff. And that's impacting the people who are picking the coffee, whether it's mechanical or by hand, as well as the wildlife around and the water supply. So here at the end of the day, the pickers are all getting paid for their coffee, which we've made some changes in the past 2 years with COVID, and everything's gone to digital payments. So there's no more cash being handed out at the farm. And it's something new that we've developed with our general manager in Costa Rica. And that might be a whole nother segment to go over, is the life after COVID. But you can see it's very manual. Each basket is weighed out by volume, and then they're paid per cojuela. That's what the baskets are called. And so some of the issues that we're seeing with supply chains right now are higher input costs, no labor. Ocean freight has gotten extremely expensive, and the people loading the containers, bringing them to port, loading them on boats, everything in the supply chain has been disrupted. So we're seeing from Costa Rica, it used to be about 7 days from the port of Costa Rica to Houston, Texas. And now that's about 21 days, if we're lucky. A lot of the coffee is getting transshipped from Costa Rica to Colombia, and then from Colombia to Houston. Don't know all the ins and outs of the shipping routes, but it's the only way we can get the coffee. Is it's got to go south before it can head north. And so this is a good example of the coffee cherry. And you can see here's the pea berry on the left, which would be one seed. And then in the middle is kind of the ideal one. It's going to have 2 seeds. And within those seeds, we have the layer of mucilage, which is the fruit. We have parchment, which is a papery protective coating, silver skin, and then the green bean that would be put into the roaster. And so when we talk about washed coffees, we're talking about removing the fruit off of the parchment. It's the receiving station where the coffee will be delivered, and then the big trailer that would then collect all the coffee and be brought down to our mill. And kind of an overview, and you can see just the size of the operation. It takes a lot of land. We have silos back here. Inside we have dryers, and then on this side we have processing equipment for the finished dried coffee. And then up here, fermentation tanks. And this is where the coffee, after the skin has been removed, the coffee goes in there, and we control the fermentation, so time and temperature, and then we wash it. And so everything goes by gravity. So we're picking the coffee up higher, the mill's at the bottom of the valley. So transportation, water, everything's a little bit more accessible down here. So our sedimentation ponds, where we treat our water that comes out of the washing process. And what we want to do is break down the sugars. We add the microbes and the bacteria. And these are lilies that float on top of the water that also help consume and break down some of the sugars that go into the sedimentation ponds. Most of the processing happens at night because everyone's picking the coffee during the day. And then again, just unloading. And the main difference here for specialty is it's a smaller scale. We're not processing massive amounts of coffee. It looks like a lot of coffee here, but in the grand scheme of things, some of the cooperatives and some of the other big commercial millers will have tractor trailer loads that are just dumping tons of coffee and not really concerned with the equipment and how the coffee is being processed from start to finish. In 2019, we purchased these eco pulpers, which use almost no water, which is a cost savings and environmental impact savings by not using water to remove the skin and some of the mucilage, so we don't have to treat as much water at the processing part when we're washing the coffee. And that's what the coffee looks like after the skin has been removed. And then we go through a lot of quality separations. And so this is a photo of the third qualities, which would be some of the commercial qualities, first quality. And so you can see some unripes, you can see some other off-colored beans. These are our lowest qualities that would come out of the mill. And these are coffees that we'd sell locally, where our first qualities are the ones that we would process and export, and they would roast at Mountain Bird. And this is some processed coffee. These are honey processed, which is where we leave the mucilage on the parchment and let it dry. What this does is it's twofold. It saves water in processing because we don't have to wash the coffee. And two, it adds a unique taste to the coffee. So it's going to have a little bit more fruit. It's going to have some sweetness and syrupiness. And it kind of takes on some of the flavor attributes of the coffee fruit. So as a consumer, if you're tasting washed coffee, you're really tasting where the coffee was grown, where this, you're tasting the process, you're tasting the honey process of the coffee. So it's kind of unique. It's very small, kind of craft style. And so we can't produce this on a huge scale. So I think our largest lots might be 10 bags of 69 kilos. And all this talk about the specialty and commercial coffee is we grow only Arabica coffee in Costa Rica. The species, there's about 4 for coffee. The most common one that's planted is Arabica, and has a lower caffeine level, but has a lot more positive taste attributes. It's going to have stone fruit, it's going to have chocolate, it's going to have nuts, like all sorts of great flavor notes. Some of the commercial coffee that's out there, it might be Arabica, but it also might be Robusta. And Robusta is it's a high producing plant, higher caffeine, but it's very bitter and it's easy to grow. It doesn't need altitude and elevation. And so a lot of commercial coffee uses it. It's cheaper. It doesn't taste good, so you're going to add cream and sugar, and you'll definitely get a little bit more of a caffeine buzz. But overall, it's not going to be as nice of a coffee to drink. And then also a lot of the Robusta coffees grown in origins that are pretty heavy on chemicals and pest prevention. So the coffee that you're seeing on these beds is coffee that's in Mountain Bird's warehouse, and they're roasting and shipping. And so as far as direct as you can get, I think the only way to get closer would be as if you're down there taking this video. Let's see. So
Jim, I'm going to mute Jim really fast. Just for the sake of time, I want to ask you guys, with Jim, knowing that being at the farm, is there any questions you have kind of at the farm level that you're still kind of wondering, like, what's the process of getting the coffee here? Anything? What, any takeaways? Like, were y'all expecting it to be that labor intensive? Yeah.
We have some questions.
Okay, yeah, let's get a question.
So this is from Victoria. You talked about how you can keep all your plants in-house and don't buy from the government. I was wondering if you have a seed bank or some way to preserve some native seeds every year.
Good question. Can you put that in the chat to Jim? I think
Yes.
What he was saying is at this particular farm, they actually do their nursery and do all of their own seeds for plant. And you might know.
Well, I'm not sure that I heard the whole question there, but what happens is that generally they're always trying to develop the seed and make it a better quality seed. So so they keep a nursery that they're always pulling from, because the plant doesn't start producing till about 5 years. It's good for maybe 20 years, but they don't let it last that long. So they're always refurbing the farm with seed stock that they have put into their own nursery. Does that answer that question?
I'll have you come up here with me too.
Okay.
So that's a good question. And I think the biggest takeaway sometimes from the farm level is it's not, when my husband and I went for the first time, my husband's question was, well, why isn't there machinery just stripping this off the side of the mountain? And I think the biggest takeaway is specialty coffee represents 0.5% of all bags actually produced in the world. So it's a very tough, and to be specialty grade, you have to have a score of 84 or above, which means you have to have little to no defects in the coffee. So that means there's not branches and leaves, and you picked mostly ripe fruit. That's how the score is really achieved higher. The other thing with specialty is it has to be traceable. So if you were to come to me and say, hey, Sarah, this coffee that you're drinking today, where did it come from? We could actually trace you right down to the farm that we sourced it from. So we can give that, we know what's happening on that farm. We know the living wage, we know how they're treated. And that's a really important part to sourcing a more ethically, sustainably based coffee. And so those would be some big pieces of the puzzle with specialty. So I'm gonna thank Jim for joining us. I really appreciate him, and I'm gonna lean back to us for the sake of time. And I'm gonna have you move back to our presentation, Kenzie. So this is the time where you guys get to get involved with the process. So I'm gonna, you have copies in front of you. Those of you who have the black coffee that Honey processed, those are the ones from the farm we were just talking about, Costa Rica La Pradera. It is a honey process, is a different type of process. Everyone else, all the coffees you have are a specialty grade coffee that we've either custom blended or a single origin, which means it comes from one farm or one or country. We're going to just go to the next slide here.
Just 1 second, sorry, I'm losing my mouse, so I keep on.
Yeah, so what she's gonna show you is what happens when it comes into our roastery. One of the things, if you were to come out to our roastery, what you would see is when we go source coffees at the farm, we bring every coffee that we've sourced. So we go down to the farm on normal years, which we hope to do this year. We contract at the farm level for all the coffees that we're going to need for the next year. And then all those coffees are sent to our warehouse, and we warehouse all of our coffees that we source, which during COVID has been amazing. We were able during COVID to open that warehouse and to bring all our coffees to us. So for us, supply chain hasn't been as much of a struggle, except for the supply chain from farm to us. Right now is when we're going to be working on what are our coffees that we're going to have carrying next year. And so when it gets to our farm, or gets to our roastery, it comes in to, so I'm just gonna go, so it comes in and it comes in big bags. They're Grain Pro bags, and then they're green. So you saw there, for most people, and maybe not you, that first time they've heard of coffee is like, oh, it's this drink, not realizing it's a fruit. And it's the seeds of a fruit that you're actually drinking. So after the whole process is done, is dried, they're bagged, shipped to us, and those are the green coffees that we have. We then take those and put them into our roaster, which we call the Bumblebee. And so I have Steve just quickly talk to us about this roasting curve, and then just some of the tools that you're going to have in front of you for cupping.
All right, thank you. Steve Gasaway is my name, and my daughter and partner in crime at Mountain Bird Coffee. I welcome you. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about specialty coffee. I heard when people came in about the coffee that they drink at home, and I want you to know that drinking coffee, to me, people go, well, gosh, I use sugar and cream. I don't care. Thank you for drinking coffee. That's how I feel about it. Specialty coffee is unique in as much as we have to take that particular coffee bean and develop a profile that brings out the best of that coffee bean. And we use it on a curve method. We'll talk about that real quickly here. is that we have to, unlike a commercial coffee, they have a computer. I'm not saying we don't, but we have a computer that coffee comes into a big silo. It gets blended in from all these different farms that they're doing. It's dropped in their roaster, usually in tons. They use like a 4-bagger or a 5-bagger, and for us, a bag is about 140 pounds. And they roast this coffee. It goes in, and generally between 10 and 12 minutes, that coffee is roasted and it's getting cooled down and being processed to be put into a cup. Put into a bag, right? Our coffee is generally, when we're developing a curve, they generally, even though a light roast might take anywhere from 13 to 17 minutes to process that roast and in the curve. So what happens here, I'm just trying to stand out of the way here. We have what we call a drop charge. So our roaster is actually at a certain temperature always. And when it gets to that particular temperature in our hopper up above our roaster, which is a big drum that circles, that turns in a circle. And when it gets to that drop charge, we will drop the beans from the hopper into the coffee roaster itself, and it will start processing, and we apply, based upon our knowledge, the correct heat and the correct airflow, and we make sure that we understand the rate of rise. So the rate of rise is once it gets to the bottom, which they call a turning point, that's when the bean actually starts absorbing heat. Between there, going down, it's at a temperature. It's not. Let's just say that temperature, that charge temperature, is 400 degrees. Well, the coffee bean you put in there is probably, we keep them conditioned in our warehouses, so it's around 70 degrees. So that coffee bean is 70 degrees. It's hitting a hot. You've taken a steak and thrown it into a pan. You see what's happening. A cold steak into a hot. So it's all of a sudden it's got to start absorbing heat. When it starts absorbing that heat, it takes this turning point here, and it starts the process of cooking. And once it starts absorbing, it's called the Maillard. If everybody in here should probably understands the Maillard effect. And what that is that we're going to start absorbing heat, and we want to make sure that bean is getting the right temperature all the way through this curve. And so at different minutes, and these are in minutes that we're looking at here, we've got a yellow, brown first crack. The first crack generally happens, and that first crack means that it's absorbed enough heat that now the heat is wanting to escape. So it sounds like popcorn. So it actually, the bean is cooking itself, just like a steak or popcorn that you would cook. So it's absorbed the heat, now it's wanting to release it. So now we're actually having to adjust time, adjust airflow, and adjust gas pressure for heat. So once we get to that first crack, what we're going to experience today is the coffees that we're going to test today are right at that first crack. So they're within, that is a very light roast. So you get to the first crack, and then all of a sudden you're going to cook it to where you think that it should be, based upon our cooking profile. Which one are you doing there first, Sarah?
I'm not, just go ahead.
Oh, and then you can get to what they call the second crack. A lot of your commercial coffees get very close to second crack. And the reason is because they want you to pick up, they don't want you to taste the off flavors. So the lighter the roast, the more coffee nuances that you have about it that's there. The higher the temperature, the less you start caramelizing sugars inside the bean. And so you find that the commercial coffees, they want to start caramelizing those sugars a little bit more. So it hides the coffee, actually the coffee essence. We call it coffee essence. You get in the second crack, and anything after second crack is usually around 418 degrees. And 418, and once you get to like 450 degrees in a coffee, you are burning coffee. And that's, so you get to that French roast, that Italian roast, those things that happen in that temperature range after second crack.
Yeah, awesome. So, what do you guys have? I'm gonna start passing coffees out, so just leave them in the order I'm going to pass them. Steve, tell us a little bit. So tell us a little bit about what you did with this process. What we're gonna take you guys through is through profile cupping. And this means we've tested the green coffee, right? We know it's a coffee we're gonna bring in. Now we're trying to figure out at what that second crack, at what temperature are we pulling it out of the roastery? And as you can see here, here's our actual roaster. And when it dumps out at the bottom, that's the temperature that you're going to decide which one you like the most. So walk them through the sheets you have as I get these passed
So
out.
we're gonna just play a little role playing here. Just real quickly, I've got this strawberry right here, and I've got a whole bunch of strawberries. I'm gonna pass it out to everybody. Everybody's got a strawberry in front of them, right? So this strawberry that you've got, I want you to take a taste of it. Everybody's got this taste of the strawberry, right? How many people in here, if they didn't know that it was a strawberry and they tasted it, can taste strawberry? Everybody taste it? You think so? Guess what? You cannot taste any food. You cannot taste anything. Your tongue has 5 receptors on it. You got a front receptor, you got a side receptor, you got a umami, and you've got a back receptor. That's all you can do is you can feed these receptors. Guess what? You don't ever taste anything. You actually smell it. So that's the same thing that happens with coffee, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to, I hope y'all don't mix those up. Just kind of keep them more in that line right there. So you're going there in the back of that little folder there. You will have a sheet that shows you these receptors on your tongue. And that's one going to be very key today as to what we are going to experience. So when you're tasting these coffees, I want you to think of as you slurp it. We're going to slurp, okay, like we're doing a straw. We're going to just slurp this up. And we're going to spray it into our mouths. And we want to find out as when we slurp it and we swallow, what happened? Where did I feel that on my tongue, right? That's all I want you to do. I want you to feel it on your tongue. And then once we have done that, then we're going to talk about what we smell. So in this back page, on the very back side, you're going to see a flavor wheel. Can you believe that there are that many different flavors, very back page, that many flavors that you can have out of a coffee bean? And so we're going to feel, we're going to have the taste, the 5 receptors. We're going to have, we're going to say, have a short discussion about what did you smell? Was it nuttiness? Was it bright? Was it citrusy? Was it floral? There are things there, and there's no right answer, right? Everybody's going to have a different opinion about this.
Yeah, and so on this sheet that you have in front of you, we're gonna do this. You have a score sheet.
Yeah.
So on that score sheet, this is a very personal experience. When we go to the cupping table on Mondays to this very same thing as an organization, we don't talk to each other as we're doing it. So we don't sway each other's opinions. And then we are going to score each one of those. A couple of things I want you to remember. Mouth feel. So some of the things on here that I want to make sure. So you're going to decide, is the aroma, is the smell of it. This coffee is cold. There's a reason for that. The coffee is cold because when it's piping hot, you don't get to taste any of the flavors. As a coffee like cools down, think about a coffee you have as it cools down. How many times do you throw it out because it doesn't taste as good anymore? Right? That's when you really get the nuances of a coffee, is when it's cool. So these are cooled. If you look from left to right, this is going to be, so don't mix them up. If you need to make some marks on the can, left to right, the one on the left, we pulled that out of the roaster at 383 degrees. The next one, we pulled that out at 387 degrees. The third one, we pulled it out at 391 degrees. And the fourth one, we pulled it out at 395 degrees. You're going to take a chance and you're going to slurp. It is very appropriate to make that loud and proud.
Yeah.
It's part of the fun. And in a traditional set, we would actually have a spoon that we would cup because we're just want to be safe about it. We're going to let you guys just have your own individual cups of this. Don't mix them up and go through each one of these and give yourself a little rating on how you would rate each one of those based on what you smell, feels in your mouth, the aftertaste of it, where it was at on your taste buds. Does it have like acidity? Does it leave like does it kind of light your tongue up? That bitter or sweet? You look on that tongue, it's either the front or the sides. And would you drink it? At the end of the day, what really matters is, would you drink it? And then if you can discern any of like the flavor nuances, mark them down. There's no right or wrong. So we're gonna give you guys just a couple of minutes to go through that process. And then we will talk about it as a group.
And here's a slurp. There's a slurp.
Yeah. I'm also gonna provide y'all a little fizzy water to drink in between each of the ones so that it cleanses your palate.
That's not right.
Just between each of the coffees, just have a chance to kind of cleanse your profile, your palate, so that you can taste the next one.
That's right here. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and we'll get to the climate change question that was asked online in just a minute. Sorry, you guys at home aren't being able to join us for this part of the experience. Where do I go here? Experience. If you at home, I think they got a bag of coffee. Yeah, so you have a bag of coffee. It's whole bean. If you have a grinder, you would want to make it medium grind. That's going to be kind of like a coarse salt. And that'll let you know that you kind of have more of the right grind for giving yourself a chance to produce. What you're tasting at home is a finished product. And we actually every week go through different roasts that we are working on to make sure that we are keeping that consistent every time you go get a bag or have a cup of our coffee.
And we do all of our coffees at least 4 times a year cupping, because as coffees sit in a bag and we buy a year at a time, that coffee starts losing moisture. And so we have to adjust our profile to accommodate for any changes that it might get to in the warehouse.
How's it go with you guys here and with us? Can you taste the difference between those? And just know, I mean, it's just a few degrees difference between each of those cups. everybody made it through all 4 or need another minute or so?
I need another minute.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Don't want to rush you through this. And feel free to keep doing this as we talk. Because what will happen as we start to talk about this coffee, you'll go back and taste one of them and kind of go, oh yeah, I do taste that. Or no, wait, that's not in my palate. Compared to the guys behind me, I am a novice at this. This is not, even though I'm one of the owners, this is not my area of expertise. I actually only drink decaf. So I'm really big about our decaf coffee being amazing. And these guys are the ones, and our roaster, we actually have another production roaster, and then 2 other employees who, they're all of our pallets collectively, and then everyone that we work with who sells our coffee. Okay. So just to let the cat out of the bag, we are drinking our Colombian. So I'm going to steal your bag right here really fast. This is the Colombian coffee. So if you were to go to any of your retail markets here locally and buy this, you would be buying the purple label. This farm is La Finca La Orizaba. All of our coffees are high altitude shade grown. And then the flavor notes. So just so you can mentally, these are the flavor notes that we are trying to pick up and really highlight when we get the right roast. And that's going to be lemon, sweet floral, chocolate, hazelnut, and caramel. It doesn't mean you're going to taste caramel, but you're going to have the experience of, like when a caramel is in your mouth, like kind of that syrupy, kind of thicker body, more of that, not like, oh, I'm smelling caramel. The nuttiness the same way. Lemon sometimes will show up with a bitterness, like that, not bitter, excuse me, with the acidity, that brightness, almost like a lemon across your tongue. Anybody pick up any of those? Okay, I don't either, for the first time. What did you taste? So you'll go around, tell me what was your favorite one? If you guys could go around, what was your favorite temperature we pulled?
Mine was sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say the 391 was my favorite.
391. And what did you like about it?
I thought it was kind of like the smoothest.
The smoothest. Okay. Excellent. How about you?
395.
395. What did you like about it?
It just tasted good.
Okay, it tasted good.
Correct.
That's great.
Yeah.
Drinkability is a big part of it.
I just had the 395 and it was definitely my favorite. Although I'm not like a big coffee drinker, like you said, you don't care that I put cream and sugar in my coffee, but I do. So it's like, this was the one that I think I would pick up again if I had to. Just,
Okay.
it was, I feel like a little bit milder, which is usually not what people want in their coffee. They want a strong coffee, but like for me, it's like, I just want something I can like get down without a lot of cream and sugar.
Okay. Good. Anybody else want to share? How about you guys? Is there one that y'all liked? Or over here, you guys?
I said 395.
395 was your favorite? What was the difference that you tasted in 383 and 395? Was any?
I could actually taste like the citrus in 383, but it was kind of way stronger, overbearingly strong.
Okay.
I agree. Like I wrote down like one of my favorite is like grapefruity because I can actually taste citrus. Which, like, another one that kind of.
And if you remember, as that curve came to first crack, that's where that acidity started to really build. Anybody else? Those are all great. Steve, what would you take away? Any comments?
Yes, I would take, I found Colombian coffees to me are one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite places in the country to travel to. The expertise that they put on these farms that we go to in Colombia are by far better. I mean, the Hacienda is one of my favorite farms also that we just showed. But Colombia, the people down there grow in small lots. So it's not like it's a big, massive farm. The Hacienda there that you saw had 1.7 million coffee plants where, and I forgot how many hectares those were on. The people in Colombia generally are farming coffee and processing it there on their farm, because in Colombia, you can't take just the cherry into the mill and get it processed. You actually have to get it, however you're processing it on farm, and then it's taken to the mill to be bought. I love that because they are able to control the sweetness, and Colombia coffees to me are very sweet, front of my tongue. First thing that I got on any of the temperatures was a very sweet taste. Another thing is most Columbia coffees that you get are, you don't want to run very dark. I mean, there are Folgers and Maxwell House and Starbucks even. I mean, Starbucks factory where we go is just right 2 blocks away. And they're not real sweet, where the Columbia coffee that you're tasting today is real sweet. It has a very nuttiness to it. It has, I mean, it's almost like an almond, and it's not a roasted almond, it's just like an almond. If you took a raw almond and put it in your mouth and got it, it would hit you the same place on your tongue as I think this coffee. Bailey, you got anything about it?
I want to speak to like the lemon specifically. Yeah, I'll stand here so that y'all can see me there. So we mentioned one of the flavor notes being lemon, and I remember when I first got to Columbia, they said lemon's a flavor note, and I was like, no, it's not. What did y'all do with this coffee? But I think over time, lemon kind of speaks to the citrusy, like you feel when you eat a lemon. I don't think a lot of people like taste when they eat a lemon. It's just like, oh, my mouth is, that's the mouth feel. And that's one of the most interesting things about Colombian coffee, and our Colombian coffee specifically, is that you can have something that's so bright and super citrusy, but it also retains a lot of that chocolate and a lot of that smoothness. Like you said, you're like, it just feels so smooth, but it's a lighter roast coffee, and that's not something that a lot of people would say about a light roast coffee. And so,
yeah, and generally when you talk about chocolate notes, people go chocolate notes. Well, God, a chocolate note is really the darker the roast, the more chocolate flavors that you attain because of the caramelization of the sugars. So a chocolate note in coffee, to bring it out into a light roast, is really, really tough to do. And this Colombian coffee actually brings out that chocolate note. I mean, you can actually, I have it at the end going down the back of my throat. I pick that nuance up. Now, don't think of it as milk chocolate, because milk chocolate is sugar. So it's more of a coca, a plant or seed that you're tasting there. So it's really pretty unique for me in Columbia coffee.
All right, so we're up on the 1 o'clock. So I just want to ask a couple questions that we have. So Steve, tell us really, are there any strange or experimental flavors that we've really loved in the coffee processing, and good or interesting? So like probably asking like La Pradera honey process. Are there any processing or experimental things with the bean that we love?
Yeah, we buy all La Pradera that we can get our hands on. I mean, it's really a small farm. Mostly it's a varietal and geisha varietal. And we like it because it brings out, I love sweet coffee. I just think sweet coffee is good. And like you like sugar and milk on it. It actually, and put a little more sugar and put some milk on it, and it really enhances that honey process. Honey process is just the way that they keep the mucilage on the outside of the bean, let it stay out on what they call an African bed a little longer, and then they peel that mucilage off of the cherry. Sometimes there's partial mucilage left, sometimes the full mucilage on the cherry itself. But it's just a process. I love honey processed coffees.
Yeah, I think that probably the other one that you'll see a lot is a natural wash process. Our Ethiopian is natural washed. Kenyan is washed though, right? Yeah. So we have natural wash, with another thing, that's another way that the mucilage, that cherry, is left on there and allows that sweetness to get in there. Another question we had is, do we have any partnerships with like chocolate or breweries? And so if you go to New Province Brewery, you'll see every year they release their Cafe Muy Especial. And that is a coffee stout with our Morning Bird blend. And so we do some of that types of partnerships just to experiment more from the brewer side. And every year when we go to farm, we're still trying to figure out what the best is for the next year. The one thing when you drink Mountain Bird, like if you go get Morning Bird blend, what she has there, which is our flagship, you want it to taste the same today as it does a year from now. And if that varies, you're kind of like mad at us. We get a lot of comments like, what happened to that? So those things we honor. The things that you will see us experiment a lot with are these single origins. Like we're working on a Kenyan AA that I think I saw someone has, that we're working on. That's a micro, that's a small, very small farm that we're working to bring in. It has some flavor nuances that we really love, that we want to experiment with. And so that's one of the big ones. And then the last question, just for our guys virtually, is climate change. I didn't give Jim a chance to talk about climate change, but how is that affecting growing conditions and labor on the farm?
So what we're seeing in the countries, the growing regions of the countries, is that the earth is actually warming. And so these beans the coffee plants have to be the ones that we're buying from are all Arabica. They're grown on the side of a hill. They're not a crop style, as you would not say, just like that. They're on that kind of farm. As the planet is warming, it's causing this elevation change to be warmer as it goes up. Well, they need rain at a certain time of the year, and they need a consistent temperature at that level that they've been growing forever. When that starts going away, there's no place else up that hill to go. So we are seeing, number one, we're seeing that they're having to change varietals for the temperature, which means they have to put in some respects, an inferior coffee varietal in there. Secondly is it changing the picking date? For instance, Colombia normally starts picking in November, early November, and picks for generally, they have 5 primaries, but Colombia can actually be picked many times as often as they get rain. But what we're seeing is that instead of this November timeframe now, they're having to move because of the temperature, moving it into December. So we're seeing our coffees come to us later on in the year because of climate change. It's also reducing the quality and quantity. Those are the big ones.
So thank y'all for joining our experience today. Thank you online for joining with us. We hope you learned something that you can take away and share. Our goal is for you to love coffee and to love Mountain Bird coffee and to elevate that experience when you can. And so we hope you go home. You guys have whole beans as well, so you'll have to find somebody to grind it for you.
If you want to go to Hill, they have a grinder. You can just say, hey, I was here for the teaching kitchen. I have this coffee. They'll grind it right for you.
They'll grind it for you right into your bag, and that bag is Ziplocked. These beans are actually, we nitrogen flush them. And so on the back of there is a roast date. That's the date it was roasted and put into that bag. Because it's nitrogen flush, that means you can leave this bag as is for 3 to 4 months, and when you unzip it, the freshness should be very similar to when it was put in the bag. So if you don't get to it for a little bit, it's okay. Thank y'all so much for joining us, and hope to see you guys next time at the next teaching session.
Thank you all.
Thank you.